Okay, welcome everybody to this first ICTS distinguished lecture by Professor Ashok Sen. Ashok Sen, as you all know, he doesn't need any introduction, but nevertheless, it is my pleasure to do it. Is one of the leading string theorists in the world today. He has made many seminal contributions to string theory. These include his work on duality symmetries in string theory, unstable d-branes and tachyon condensation, and counting of microstates of quantum black holes. And for his contributions, he has received several awards. I will not list all of them, but notably the ICTP prize. This is the first one he got. The Bhatnagar prize, the TWAS prize, and most recently the Fundamental Physics prize. So Ashok did his undergraduate studies in Kolkata at Presidency College and at IIT Kanpur, and his PhD at the State University of New York at Stony Brook. And after his postdoctoral work at Fermilab, where we first met, and at SLAC, he joined the Tata Institute of Fundamental Research in Mumbai, where he was there for several years before he moved to the Harishchandra Research Institute, where he is a distinguished professor. It says that. So Ashok has been involved with the International Center for Theoretical Sciences from its very inception, from day -1. And he is also a member of its International Advisory Council and the Advisory Council for Appointments at the ICTS. And it gives me great pleasure to invite him for this lecture. But before that, in the absence of any other great dignitaries, or we don't have many dignitaries, I'd like to present you with this Ashok. My pleasure. Come. Here, I think I need to change this.
Thank you, Spenta, for the very kind introduction. And I'd also like to thank ICTS for inviting me for this lecture. Now, a few words about the talk before I begin. Okay, first of all, I would like to apologize to the experts because this will be very elementary from the point of view of the experts. I'd also like to apologize to the non-experts because it will not be a public lecture. Okay, so I will assume some technical knowledge of quantum mechanics and gravity and so on. And finally, a word about the duration of the talk. So I was not sure how long I should speak for, so I wrote to Subrat. And he wrote back saying that, well, you have set aside 1.5 hours, but it's really up to you. You can take more time, you can take less time. And I guess that has been the spirit of this workshop. But, but I think to be fair, I should say that these same criteria should apply to the audience. So anytime you find that the talk is getting either too difficult or too simple for you, please feel free to leave. So don't have to feel ashamed to leave the talk in the middle. Okay, so the purpose of this lecture is to give some general introduction to holography and quantum gravity. Okay, and then describe some of the recent work that I have been involved in. So here is a plan. Essentially, I will try to divide this into 3 parts. First, I will try to describe what exactly is holography, what do you mean, what is the statement of holography. Then in the second part of the talk, I will try to describe how we go about finding examples of holography. Okay, is there a systematic procedure or do you have to just guess? Okay, I will discuss some examples of this. And then in the third part, I will discuss how do we test holography, that once you have arrived at some postulate of holography, how do you actually go about testing that postulate. So let me begin by stating what holography means. Okay. And it's really a very profound statement. What it says is that a theory of quantum gravity on certain space-time, which are known as anti-de Sitter space-time, okay, or in short ADS space-time, is equivalent to a conformal invariant quantum field theory in one less dimensions. Now the reason that this is a very profound statement is, first of all, that the quantum gravity is a difficult subject, okay, whereas quantum field theory, even though it's a difficult subject, we think that we understand it. Okay, so clearly it's relating something difficult to something which we think is simple. But what's more is that it not only makes things simple, but it also reduces the number of dimensions. Okay, so here you have gravity in one additional space-time dimension, and we have a quantum field theory in one less dimension, so it's even simpler. Okay, because we have one less dimension of space-time to analyze. But to really understand what it means, you have to start from the beginning, and you have to understand, first of all, what we mean by anti-de Sitter space-time. Okay, because this is not something that you are normally familiar with. And one simple way to describe what an anti-de Sitter space-time is the following. Okay. So let's consider a flat space-time with n space coordinates, okay, which I'll denote by W1 to Wn, and 2 time coordinates. Okay, so it's somewhat unusual. Normally you have only 1 time coordinate, but let's suppose that you have 2 time coordinates, but otherwise it's just a flat space-time with the standard metric. So the metric has 2 eigenvalues -1, and the rest of the eigenvalues are +1. Now in this space we consider an n+1 dimensional subspace. Okay, so this you will see that it's an n+2 dimensional space. So we consider here a n+1 dimensional subspace by a single equation which is given here. Okay, R is just a constant parameter which will turn out to be what is called the radius or the size of ADS. So this is what we mean by an anti-de Sitter space-time locally. Okay, so this is an n+1 dimensional anti-de Sitter space-time, and we will denote this by ADS with a subscript n+1. Now to analyze this space-time, okay, it's often simpler to work with independent coordinates. So instead of saying that it's you have n+2 coordinates and you have one equation that relates those n+2 coordinates, we can also eliminate one of the coordinates and find n+1 independent coordinates. But the price you pay is that the metric, of course, is no longer just the eta mu nu that you are familiar with, but it's almost it's not very far from eta mu nu. Okay, so this is the structure of anti-de Sitter space-time metric. So what we can show is that by suitable coordinate transformation, we can find coordinates x0 to xn-1. So these are n coordinates, and then there is an additional coordinate z. Okay. And in these coordinates, the metric takes this following form. Okay, so there is an overall factor r squared times z to the -2. Okay, this is of course just a constant. This has a non-trivial dependence on the z coordinate, and then the rest of the metric is just a diagonal matrix. Okay, just exactly what you see in flat Minkowski space-time. So here I have written that metric again, okay, and often it's more convenient to describe this, okay, by specifying what is the line element or what is the proper distance element. Okay. So what this captures exactly the same information about the metric, okay, except that it's written in a slightly different form. This tells us that if we have 2 different points in this space-time, okay, with separated by the interval dx0, dx1 up to dz, then this is the proper distance between those 2 points, right? This is exactly what you will get if you use this metric. Now one thing you notice from this metric is a peculiar feature, that the metric component goes to infinity as z approaches 0. Okay, so if you take z to 0, then the metric component goes to infinity. In particular, if you consider 2 points separated by finite difference between the x mu's, okay, so take 2 points which differ by x1, okay, by some fixed number, say epsilon. Okay. Then as z goes to 0, the distance between the 2 points actually goes to infinity, because there is a 1 over z squared sitting in front. So here is the same metric again, okay, and pictorially, okay, we can represent it like this. Okay, this is supposed to be a straight line, not a wavy line as it appears here. Okay. But what this line stands for, okay, in fact is not just one line but the whole n-dimensional space-time that is labeled by x0, x1 up to xn minus 1. Okay, I couldn't have drawn it on this two-dimensional plane. Okay. But the important direction that you want to focus on is this z direction. Okay. This is the direction in which the metric varies, right? So the distance between the 2 points here is much larger compared to the distance between the 2 points here if the x separation remains the same. So this surface, okay, z equal to 0 is what is called the boundary of the anti-de Sitter space-time. And often for practical calculations we place the boundary not exactly at z equal to 0 but at z equal to some small number epsilon. Okay, so this is what we will take as a boundary of the anti-de Sitter space-time. Okay, so this describes what is ADS. Now what is a CFT or a conformal field theory, because this is the other side of this equivalence. So a conformal field theory is a regular quantum field theory, okay, but it has some new symmetries. Okay, so of course quantum field, we have a regular quantum field theory. Normally a quantum field theory we consider relativistic quantum field theory which are Lorentz invariants. But a conformal field theory is also invariant under some additional symmetries which are known as scale transformation and spatial conformal transformation. So the scale transformation corresponds to the symmetry where you take each of the coordinates and then scale them by some number lambda. Okay. And spatial conformal transformations are given by this. Okay. So B mu's here are arbitrary parameters. Okay. So there are there are n parameters here if you are considering an n-dimensional Minkowski space-time. Okay. And this is the way the spatial conformal transformation acts. Okay. So a conformal field theory is invariant under the usual Lorentz transformations as well as these new transformations that are given here. And a simple example of a conformal field theory is just ordinary Maxwell's theory without sources, okay, and that you can show is conformal invariant in 4 space-time dimensions. Okay, so this is part of the simplest example of a conformal field theory. And we will use the symbol CFTN to describe a conformal field theory in n space-time dimensions. So now we are in a position to state what we mean by ADS CFT correspondence or holography. So let's recall the metric on ADS n plus 1, okay, which was given here. And as I had said that we will know the real boundary of this space-time is at z equal to 0, but often for practical calculation we can put the boundary at z equal to epsilon. Now you see that if we take z equal to epsilon and fix z, then the metric in the x0 to xn direction is just the Minkowski metric up to an overall factor of 1 over epsilon square. In fact, it's more precisely r square over epsilon square, right? Because if you take z equal to epsilon, you get r square over epsilon square, and then this part is just the Minkowski metric. The dz part is not relevant because you are fixing z. Now holography is the statement that a theory of quantum gravity in this n plus 1 dimensional ADS space is equivalent to an n-dimensional conformal field theory in this n-dimensional Minkowski space that is sitting at the boundary of ADS space. Okay. Namely, we take z equal to epsilon, that describes an n-dimensional Minkowski space which is the boundary of this ADS space. Okay. And the complicated theory of quantum gravity in n plus 1 dimensional ADS space is completely equivalent to a conformal field theory sitting at the boundary. Right? That's the statement of holography. Okay, are there any questions up to this point?
I didn't get why to go from n plus 2 to n plus 1 in the first place.
Oh, that was just to describe physically what an ADS space is. Okay, I could have written down the metric from the beginning in n plus 1 dimensional form, right? But just like to describe a 2-dimensional sphere, it's often useful to write down an equation in 3 dimensions, right? So that's what I did in the first step, right? Just to motivate what ADS space time might look like. But I could have just written down the metric in ADS space from the beginning, right? I didn't have to start from the n plus 1 2-dimensional space.
It was originally introduced like a based on this entropy argument and so on.
Yes, you are talking about large and gauge theory, right?
Pardon?
No, you are talking
He's
about.
asking about the holography of this.
Okay, yeah. So his idea, okay, that was based on some analysis of black holes, right? That's the holographic idea arose in the first place. But I think that this is the concrete realization of the holographic idea, right? That the theory of quantum gravity on an ADS space is at the boundary, right? This is an exact statement between two theories, right? Which you couldn't have done before this understanding of ADS CFT duality. Okay, any other questions? Yes. Okay, conformal invariance essentially is a statement that a theory is, okay, scale invariance you understand, right? Scale invariance means that a theory is equivalent at all scales. Okay? And free electrodynamics is like that, right? It's equivalent at all scales, okay? Because there is really no intrinsic scale in electrodynamics. Okay? Conformal invariance is a little bit more, okay, which includes these additional symmetries. Okay? And what you can show that these symmetries together with the Lorentz transformation forms a group. Okay. So this is a special kind of symmetry in space time, and this you can show is a symmetry, for example, of the free Maxwell's theory. Okay. So this is just, you can think of this as an extension of the Lorentz symmetry. Right? Lorentz symmetry is also something which acts on the space time coordinates. Right? And normally the field theories that we encounter are Lorentz invariant. Okay. This is not true for conformal invariance. Right? The normal field theories that we encounter, which describes, for example, our particle physics, are not conformal invariant theories. Right? That's why it's not so familiar, but it's just a theory which obeys certain extra symmetries. Right? That's the way you should think of conformal invariant field theories.
So B is arbitrary here.
Pardon?
B is supposed to be arbitrary.
Yes, B is an arbitrary parameter. Okay, just like in translation you translate by an arbitrary parameter A mu. So similarly B mu here is a parameter of transformation. Right? So B mu as well as lambda are arbitrary parameters. Right? And the idea is that the theory must be such that it's invariant under these symmetries. That when you make a coordinate transformation like this, the theory is invariant. Okay. Now given that this is the statement of holography, you might ask, why is holography important? Right? Why are people so excited about holography? Now there are various reasons for this. Okay, I'll just state two of them. Okay. Now the first reason is, and this we'll encounter even later. Okay. What one finds is that often it maps difficult problems in quantum field theory to simple questions in classical gravity in appropriate limit. Right? So using holography, okay, we can sometimes address difficult problems in quantum gravity, okay, just as a problem in classical gravity. Okay. This of course requires taking appropriate limit of the quantum field theory, okay, but it's precisely those limits in which analyzing quantum field theory directly is difficult. Okay. So just in terms of practical applications, it gives us a tool, okay, to analyze difficult problems in quantum field theory. But I think what's more important, okay, is that holography allows us to give a precise definition of quantum gravity in certain space times by relating it to an ordinary quantum field theory whose rules are quite well understood. Okay. And this is precisely in the context of ADS CFT correspondence. Okay. I said that a string theory on ADS space is equivalent to string theory or a theory of quantum gravity in ADS space is equivalent to a quantum field theory living on its boundary. Okay. Now as we will discuss later, okay, that the rules of quantum gravity in ADS space, okay, are not completely well understood. Right? It's understood to a large extent, that's why we can make a statement like this, but it's not completely laid out. Okay. So in a sense you can think of this holography, okay, as giving us a way to define that instead of saying that it's a correspondence between two theories, it's a duality between two theories. Okay, you can also turn this argument around and say that this is what this defines quantum gravity, okay, in this particular space times, namely ADS space times. And this you can do because quantum field theory is something which we believe we understand quite well. Right? In principle you can put it on a computer and solve it, okay, and hence that gives a way to define quantum gravity in the space times. Well, I will be mostly referring to string theory, but there are also some examples of holography, right, where the dual quantum gravity theory is not at least manifestly a string theory. right? There may be some hidden string theory, but not manifestly string theory, and I'll just mention some of those examples later. Okay, so now we turn to the second topic of the talk. Okay, how do we find examples of holography? Okay, I mean, it can't be that we suddenly one day think of some ADS space and some conformal field theory and declare that those two theories are equivalent. So is there a systematic way of deciding which theory of quantum gravity on an ADS n plus 1 space is dual to which particular conformal field theory in n dimensions? Okay, is there a systematic way of finding these correspondence? Now at present we know the answer to this only in a small class of examples, okay? But the small class is not a small number of examples, because each class in fact contains infinite number of examples, right? So you can say we know examples of holography in a small set, okay, but each set is like an infinite family. So we will discuss how we arrive at these correspondences, okay, and from now on, at least for a while, we will restrict our discussion to string theory. Okay, when we'll describe how do we arrive at a correspondence, this ADS-CFT correspondence in the context of string theory. Okay, and in this case, the quantum gravity theory will refer to string theory. So string theory, okay, perhaps you have heard of string theory. String theory is a quantum theory of gravity in which elementary particles are replaced by one-dimensional string-like objects. Okay, so the basic idea or basic postulate of string theory is that we build the theory based on some fundamental objects, but those fundamental objects are not elementary particles as in a conventional quantum field theory, but elementary one-dimensional string-like objects. But these, even though these are the elementary objects in string theory, besides this there are many other composite objects, and these composite objects could have higher or lower number of dimensions. Okay, there is no reason why, even if you start with a theory where the elementary objects are strings, okay, the composite objects should also all be string-like objects. Okay. So one example is this particular string theory known as type 2B string theory in 10 space-time dimensions. This has an object which extends in 3 directions, okay, and this is called a D3 brane or a Dirichlet 3 brane. Okay. Now this brane comes essentially from membrane. Okay. So in this language, okay, a membrane will be like a 2 brane, right, because membranes are 2-dimensional planes. Okay, so membrane will be called 2 brane. A string, okay, in this language would be called a 1 brane, because strings are 1-dimensional objects. Okay. A particle will be called a 0 brane. Okay, now these are all things we are familiar with, right? A particle or a string or a membrane, okay, is something we are familiar with because we can visualize them in 3 dimensions. Okay. A 3 brane is something which you cannot really visualize in 3 dimensions, because in a 3 dimensions a 3 brane will basically fill up the whole space. Okay. But when you are considering a higher dimensional space time, okay, in fact in this case there are 9 space and 1 time directions. Okay. So in such space time you can certainly consider more general class of branes. Okay, a 3 brane will only fill 3 of those 9 directions, right? So a 3 brane will have 6 directions which are transverse to it, okay, which are orthogonal to it, and then the 3 directions which are along the brane. So there are many objects like this, and these objects are in fact going to play a crucial role in arriving at this various ADS-CFT correspondence. Okay, are there any questions? Now in general the dynamics of composite objects is always very complicated, right, because essentially the dynamics of a composite object in a quantum field theory, okay, leave alone string theory, will involve infinite number of internal vibrational modes, right? You can think of a normal string, right, which is made of the atoms and molecules, right? I mean, of course it has the usual vibrational modes, right? It can vibrate like this, but if you are really careful, okay, it has also many internal modes, right, because atoms and molecules of the string can vibrate inside. Okay, so it has a very complicated dynamics. But if we look at the low energy, okay, or long wavelength limit, okay, then the dynamic simplifies. Okay. And in fact in the low energy or long wavelength limit we expect that the dynamics of a p-brane, okay, which is a p-dimensional extended object, will be described by some quantum field theory in p+1 dimensions. Now, if this is not so familiar, okay, we can go back again to familiar examples. Okay, take for example a point-like object, a zero brane. Right? How will you describe the dynamics of a zero brane? Right? The dynamics of a zero brane will be described by some kind of quantum mechanics. Okay? A quantum mechanics you can think of as a 0 plus 1 dimensional quantum field theory, right? Because a quantum mechanics doesn't have any space direction. The degrees of freedom are not fields. Okay, they are just functions of time. Okay, so a quantum mechanics is like a 0 plus 1 dimensional quantum field theory. That's why a zero brane is described by a 0 plus 1 dimensional quantum field theory. A slightly more non-trivial example is the dynamics of a string, right? If you have a string stretched between 2 points, okay, then if you set up some vibration on the string, okay, essentially the dynamics of those vibrations are contained in the one-dimensional wave moving along the string. Okay. And so the quantum theory of those one-dimensional waves moving on the string will be a 1 plus 1 dimensional quantum field theory. Right? The one dimension being the space direction being along the string, and of course the time direction is always there. So generalizing this, we can see that a membrane dynamics will be controlled by a 2 plus 1 dimensional quantum field theory, okay, and in general a p brane dynamics will be controlled by a p plus 1 dimensional quantum field theory. Okay, but this is only in the long wavelength limit. Okay, otherwise the dynamics can be more complicated. Now these were somewhat trivial example, but a non-trivial example of this involves precisely this D3 branes that I just introduced. It turns out that if we take n of these D3 branes in this 9 plus 1 dimensional type 2B string theory and put them all on top of each other, then their dynamics is controlled by some specific, it should be controlled by some 3 plus 1 dimensional quantum field theory. Okay. But this 3 plus 1 dimensional quantum field theory is very special. Okay. It has a name, it's known as n equal to 4 supersymmetric non-abelian gauge theory based on the group UN. Now, you don't need to know precisely what this means. Okay, it's some kind of 3 plus 1 complicated 3 plus 1 dimensional quantum field theory. Okay, it's a gauge theory with certain number of fermions, certain number of scalars and so on. Okay. But one important point about this theory is that this theory is known to be invariant under conformal transformations. Okay, so this is not only a 3 plus 1 dimensional quantum field theory, but this is actually a 3 plus 1 dimensional conformal field theory. Any questions? Yes.
These branes are infinitely extended, or?
Yes, they are infinitely extended. So you can think of this 3 plus 1 dimension as of infinite extent, right? And you have this quantum field theory living on those. Okay. Later on, we will also consider the case where the D3 branes, how you think of this as a sphere geometry. Okay. But those will be related to this by conformal transformation. Okay, but right now you think of these as infinitely extended D3 branes.
Mass scale here. You string theory here, control that part of prime.
Yes, exactly.
Okay. When you say equivalent theory, field theory now, there is no alpha prime.
Yes, because this is in the low energy limit. Right? See, when you take the low energy limit, all the massive string modes, everything decouples. Right? You are supposed to keep only the low massless modes.
Zero slope limit of the string theory.
Yeah, it is in a sense it is a zero slope limit of the string theory. Exactly. This is not a full string theory, but we will come back to full string theory. So as far as the conformal field theory is concerned, it's just a normal quantum field theory. Right? You take the zero slope limit and you get to the normal quantum field theory. Okay, is this okay? Okay. Now it turns out that there is a different way of describing the same system. And this different way follows from the fact that the string theory is a theory of gravity. Okay. So these D3 branes carry their own tension, okay, mass per unit length or mass per unit 3 volume. Okay. And because of this they produce gravitational field. Okay, and of course they also produce various other fields which are present in the type 2B string theory. Okay, but they produce gravitational field. Okay. So the second way of describing these D3 branes is as some kind of classical solutions to the equations of motion of gravity, okay, which has their source in the D3 brane. Now it turns out that this solution, okay, is not some arbitrary solution in gravity, but it is a very special kind of solution. Okay. It's in fact a zero temperature limit of what is called a black brane solution. Now, what is a black brane solution? I am sure you are all familiar with black holes, right? At least you have heard of black holes, okay, which are characterized by event horizon. Okay. So, black holes are objects which are localized in space, right? It's some kind of hole, okay, which is surrounded by horizon. Okay. A black brane, okay, is not quite a hole, it's not localized in space time, but it's something that extends in 3 directions, right? Because you can see that because if you are trying to describe the field produced by an infinite 3-dimensional infinite object, right, then obviously the fields that it produces, right, cannot depend on those 3 directions, right, because there is transition invariance along those 3 directions. So a black brane is something which is non-trivial in the transverse direction, right? So as you come from the transverse direction, right, it looks like a black hole, okay, and you encounter a event horizon, okay, and this corresponds to some kind of extremal limit of a black free brane, okay, which basically means it's a 0 temperature black hole, right, if you come from the transverse direction. So this is a very peculiar characteristic of this free brane solution, okay, but this has some profound consequences. This consequence follows from the fact that a black hole has horizon, okay, so similarly a black brane also has horizon, okay, but in this case the horizon of course is not localized, it's not a sphere localized in some finite region in space time, it's a horizon that extends along those 3 directions, right, because it's completely translated invariant along those 3 directions, right. So you look at it from the transverse direction and what you find is that as you come towards the this black brane, you encounter an event horizon, okay, at some point. Now, one property of an event horizon, okay, is this infinite gravitational redshift. Okay, now what is an infinite gravitational redshift? You are probably all familiar with the fact that if you have a clock at the surface of the earth, okay, then because of the gravitational field of the earth, the clock moves slower, right? Its time slows down, right? Which basically means that the frequency of oscillation of the atoms that are producing the signal, okay, that slows down, okay, the frequency goes down. Now a black hole has very strong gravitational field, okay, and the gravitational field is so strong that at the horizon of the black hole, okay, this slowing down of the clock, okay, is an infinite amount of slowing down. Okay. So when you look at it from far, right, from far you will find that the closer a clock is to the horizon, okay, the slower it is. Okay. And in fact a clock sitting exactly at the horizon will not move at all from the point of view of an asymptotic observer. Now frequency, so this means that the frequency of all oscillations go to 0. Okay. Now quantum mechanics of course relates frequency to energy, right. So this in turn means that the energy of the quantum of excitations go to 0, okay, as you go towards the horizon of the black hole. So the modes of excitation near the horizon of this black hole, okay, appear to be of extremely low energy from the point of view of an observer who is far away from the branes, right. It's simply because the frequencies have reduced, okay, and as a result of reduction in the frequency the energies have reduced, okay. So all the modes look very low energy from the point of view of an observer at infinity. Are there any questions? Yes. Yes, ADS is an exact string background. Yes, right now we are thinking of this, I'm coming to that near horizon geometry. Right now we are thinking of this 3 brane as this is as a 3 brane producing geometry which look from the far, right? This is not ADS, right? ADS will come as you go close to the horizon, right? Which is what I am going to discuss next. Okay, so the dynamics of these low energy modes, okay, then will be given by a string theory in the near horizon geometry, right? Because all string excitations, see the beauty is that normally the string excitations are very massive, right, very energetic. So when you take the low energy limit, the string excitations simply decouple, right, you don't think of them, you don't see the string excitations at low energy, okay. But because of the presence of this horizon, right, even a massive string state that is present at the horizon, okay, will look like infinitely low energy from the point of view of an observer at infinity, okay. All with the same energy because all of them are ground states, okay, and this energy of course we can take to be 0 by a shift. Now this looks like a very strange kind of statement, okay. We have a highly complicated string theory in this ADS2 times S2 times K background, okay, and you are saying that that object, that theory is dual to just a finite dimensional Hilbert space, right? But nevertheless, this is what the ADS-CFT correspondence will tell us, right? If we just follow the usual argument of ADS-CFT correspondence on the nose, okay, this is the conclusion that we reach. Are there any questions? So this will lead to this equivalence of string theory on ADS2 times S2 times K and a quantum mechanical system with finite dimensional Hilbert space and zero Hamiltonian. And this can be also generalized to cases where the black hole is embedded in n plus 1 dimensional space time instead of 3 plus 1 dimensional space time. Okay, I just took the 3 plus 1 dimensions for convenience because it's easy to visualize. Okay, all that will happen in higher dimensional space time is that this S2 will be replaced by either Sn or some squash version of a n-dimensional sphere. So this, what I described so far, okay, is what we can call a systematic approach of finding examples of ADS-CFT correspondence. However, there is another approach of finding examples of ADS-CFT correspondence, and this is just to make a clever guess, right? You just have to look around, okay, look at conformal field theories, look at various string theories and ADS spaces, okay, and come up with some conjecture that this theory is dual to that, right? And then you perform some tests. And indeed, I mean, it's not an isolated instance. There have been many recent discoveries of such correspondence, okay, and these typically involve higher spin theories of gravity rather than string theory. Okay. But again, there are quite a lot of indications that perhaps these higher spin theories are also connected to string theory in some ways. Okay. But for most of my talk, I will not talk about these correspondences anymore. Okay, now I come to the last part of the talk, okay, that how is an ADS-CFT correspondence tested, right? That we said, we made this very tall claim, right, that an n equal to 4 supersymmetric Yang-Mills theory in 3 plus 1 dimensions is equivalent to type 2B string theory on ADS5 times S5. Okay. Now symmetry is of course match, but that's not enough, right? I mean, what exactly you mean by, first of all, that they are equivalent, right? What quantity in one theory will be related to what quantity in the other theory, right? So this is the first question you have to ask, right? When you say the two theories are equivalent, you have to make this conjecture more precise. Okay? What quantities in CFTN are related to what quantities in quantum gravity on ADS-n plus 1? Yes.
I was supposing the high spin theories of gravity. So I thought graviton is spin 2 on the gravity means spin 2 objects.
No, there is a high, okay. No, specifically by higher spin theories, I mean this theory is developed by Vasiliev, right? He has found a whole lot of consistent theories of gravity plus higher spin objects, higher spin fields in ADS spaces, right? And these dualities involve these Vasiliev theories. So one side of the story is just an regular conformal field theory. The other side of the story is this Vasiliev theory.
No, but graviton is still spin 2 object only. Okay.
Yes, yes, of course you have spin theory, spin 2 object. On top of that you have higher spin theories. Yeah, no, not that the graviton is replaced by a higher spin object. Yeah, exactly.
But you are not so far upset how this thing is used to understand the quantum theory of gravity. But the whole problem was that we don't know.
Well, the point is, because the conformal field theory is renormalizable, right? N equal to 4 supersymmetric Yang-Mills theory is perfectly well defined, right? So if that theory is equivalent to the theory of type 2B string theory in ADS5 times S5, right? Then all calculations in type 2B string theory in ADS5 times S5, you can map it to a corresponding calculation in conformal field theory in 3 plus 1 dimension. And that calculation of course is completely doable, right? So it gives an indirect way of defining quantum theory of gravity, right? Provided you understand the rules, right? What quantities, and if you want to take a quantum theory of gravity and do some calculations, right? How do you map that problem to conformal field theory?
Yeah, but
Right?
in funny spaces though.
Pardon? Yes, in funny spaces.
Gravity is not defined in the space that you wanted to solve.
I agree. I agree.
It is defined in some other space.
Yes, that's right. Okay, so the idea is that you have to try to use this as a lesson, right? Maybe I'll come back to that at the end, right? That why we can, this gives you at least, this tells you the quantum gravity can be defined in these spaces, right? And now the question is, can you generalize this?
And the space can be made as big as you like. So it's not so much.
Yeah, so you can take, there is a radius parameter, you can take the radius to be as big as you like by adjusting the n of SUN, right? So in that case you can go close to Minkowski space, as close to Minkowski space as you like, okay? But nevertheless it will be a very special type of Minkowski space, right? It will have certain flux and so on.
So the flux becomes as small as you want.
Okay, yeah, but it becomes now a 10-dimensional Minkowski space because the S5 also increases, right? It's not, it doesn't remain a 5 plus 1, 5-dimensional ADS5, because what happens as you take this radius parameter to infinity, both the ADS becomes flatter and the S5 that was there, that also becomes flatter and flatter, right? So in this limit it defines a 10-dimensional type to be string theory as a limit. Yes.
So, you have the correspondence to the finite dimensional quantum system. So I was thinking whether we can take a dimension to be 2 directly to the second system.
Well, I'll come back to it. You don't have a choice, right? Because this finite dimensional quantum system, right, is what you get by quantizing the system that describes the black hole, right? So you have to basically take what you get, right? If you have taken a specific example, specific black hole configuration, you have to basically look at the quantum system, calculate its downstate degeneracy, and that is the dimension of the Hilbert space.
What is that typical dimension?
It's typically large, right? It depends on the charges that the black hole carry, right? And if you take the black hole charges to be large, then the dimension of the Hilbert space is quite big. Yes.
ADS space you can make as large as you want and come close to Minkowski kind of situation. But what about the other side? CFT is also broken. Conformal invariance is also broken in real life. So can you imagine that? Can you guess that photography will still be there even when conformal invariance is broken?
Yeah, there are certainly examples people have constructed starting from conformal invariant system, right? Then you break conformal invariance, right? And then you have an Enormous group flow, right? From one CFT either to a trivial theory or some other infrared conformal field theory. And people have studied the holographic description of these. And these will typically correspond to backgrounds which are more complicated than ADS5, right? So these certainly have been considered, right? But the basic, duality is ADS CFT, and then you try to build on that, right, by perturbing the conformal field theory by certain, say, operators. Okay, so the approach that we will follow, okay, for telling, okay, precisely what quantities in conformal field theory related to what quantities in ADS, okay, is based on a Euclidean version of this correspondence, and this was developed independently by Gubser, Klebanov, Polyakov and Witten. Okay, and I will briefly describe what that correspondence is. So let's go back to the metric on ADS, n plus 1 dimensional ADS space, okay, which is given here. Okay. And this Euclidean version essentially involves analytic continuation. Okay. So we take the coordinate x naught to imaginary values. Okay, so you replace x naught by I times x naught, and in that case you can write this metric in this form. Okay. Now you can see that the boundary, okay, for fixed z as z equal to epsilon becomes an n-dimensional Euclidean space with flat metric, right? Again there should be an 1 over r square, which I have forgotten. Sorry, there should be r square epsilon to the minus 2. But besides this overall factor, it's just an Euclidean metric. Okay, so you have an n-dimensional Euclidean space. And you do the same thing in CFT, right? You take x naught and replace it by I x naught. And the claim now is that the correlation functions of operators in this conformal field theory are given by path integral over all fields in string theory with appropriate boundary condition on the ADS space. Okay. And different operators, of course there are infinite number of operators in this conformal field theory, right? So you can consider different correlation functions in this conformal field theory. Okay. And having different operators correspond to different boundary conditions, right? So if you want to calculate one particular set of correlation functions, you have to put one kind of boundary condition on the fields on ADS. If you consider another kind of correlation functions, you have to put another kind of boundary condition on the fields on ADS. Now this looks a little vague, so I'll try to make it a little more concrete, okay, but it will involve a little technical formula, okay, which is here. Okay, this is a more precise statement of this correspondence. Okay. That let's imagine that y of x gives you a complete set of local operators in the conformal field theory, right? And so what you want to calculate in a conformal field theory are essentially correlation functions, okay, vacuum expectation values of product of these operators at different points. Now one way to encode all this information about conformal field theory, okay, is to define a generating function. Okay. So how do you define a generating function? The generating function is a functional of several functions, phi 1 of x, phi 2 of x. Okay, this x stands for all space-time coordinates, right? Or in the Euclidean, it stands for all the Euclidean coordinates. Okay. So this is a functional of various fields, okay, and this functional is defined as the correlation function of an exponential of this function. Okay. So if you want to extract, for example, from here, okay, the correlation function of O1 of x1, O2 of x2. What you have to do is you have to basically take this z and expand in powers of phi 1, right? Phi 1 and phi 2, and you basically pick up the coefficient in this big expression. If you know the expression for this, right, you essentially have to pick up the coefficient of phi 1 of x1 times phi 2 of x2, right? And that coefficient will give you a correlation function O1 of x1 times O2 of x2. Okay. So this functional, okay, which is normally called the CFT partition function, contains complete information about all that you wanted to know in this CFT. Okay, at least as far as the local operators are concerned. And ADS CFT correspondence tells us how to calculate this, okay, from the point of view of a dual string theory. Okay. So according to ADS CFT correspondence, okay, Z CFT can be computed by the path integral over all the fields in string theory with boundary condition at z equal to 0 or z equal to epsilon set by the functions phi 1 of x, phi 2 of x, etc. So these functions phi 1, phi 2, etc., which are just some auxiliary variables which are multiplying these operators in CFT. Okay. These in the on the ADS side, these have to be interpreted as the boundary values of ADS fields in the theory. Okay. And the fact that you have infinite number of possible operators here, okay, essentially is reflected in the fact that there are infinite number of possible fields in string theory on ADS. Now I should add that it's quite an art to figure out, okay, which operator corresponds to which field, right? And the complete story is still not understood. Okay, a lot of it is understood, and though that is whatever is understood is used to test this ADS CFT correspondence. Okay. But this is a general prescription. So the statement is that for every operator in the conformal field theory, okay, you can associate a field, and phi 1 of x would be interpretable as a boundary value of that field. Okay, at z equal to epsilon. Okay, are there any questions?
Under the weak rotation?
Yes, after the weak rotation. This is being done in the Euclidean.
You can undo it,
Yes, you can in principle undo it.
so it's not really Euclidean.
Well, you are defining the theory in the Euclidean space, right? You can undo it to do various computations in the original theory.
Because I mean, the original theory is just, I mean, the gravity side is just ADS. So there you can always undo the equation.
Yeah, conformal field theory side is also just Minkowski space, right? So you can undo the weak rotation. And that is for many questions you can certainly undo the weak rotations and translate this into physical quantities in Lorentzian space time.
So in the Lorentzian, for the gravity part, is there some, I don't know, is there some process which, as an example of this, is there something on the gravitational side which
Yeah, the point is, okay, this is only one version of how you test, right? You can also directly try to set up this in the Lorentzian theory, right? A dynamical process in CFT should correspond to some dynamical process going on in the interior, right? It's much simpler to state this because it's a very concrete correspondence, right? And you can in principle try to calculate both sides and test it, right? But it's not that it is restricted only to Euclidean version, right? There are also Lorentzian ways of trying to make sense of ADS CFT correspondence.
for the Euclidean theory, the equations all become elliptic, right? So then I just even conceive of boundary values being completely determined and determining.
Well, you are thinking of classical equations.
Yeah, I'm thinking of
Yeah, classically, but the point is, again, you can then translate this to some statement in the Lorentzian theory, right? So this, the precise statement is that the Euclidean correlation functions in the CFT are given by this, right? And now you can weak rotate and make a statement in Lorentzian theory, right? You just analytically continue both sides back to Lorentzian theory.
There's always this time hanging around.
Yes, there is a time hanging around. I mean, there are different times that you can use in ADS, right? I mean, this coordinate that I have used, the x0 you can think of as a time, but this is not what is called a global ADS time, right? There is also a global ADS time that you can define, right? And you can do this in various coordinate systems. Okay. Now, it's sometimes also useful to work in a slightly different coordinate system, in which the boundary of the ADS space is a sphere instead of a flat Euclidean space, right? Earlier, the way I described the ADS metric, the boundary was this flat Euclidean space labeled by x0, x1 up to xn. Okay. But you can also, by a coordinate transformation, write the ADS metric in this form. Okay. So y is just r is the same r coordinate, radius of ADS. Y is a coordinate on ADS, and this d omega is a distance element on a unit n-dimensional sphere. Okay. So for example, if n is equal to 2, then d omega square is just d theta square plus sine square theta d phi square. So in this coordinate system, the boundary of ADS is at y equal to infinity. Okay. And again, you can regulate the boundary by placing it at y equal to y naught. Okay. But now you see that at y equal to y naught, the boundary is actually a sphere, right? In fact, it's a sphere of radius r times sine hyperbolic y naught, right? Because this d omega precisely is the line element of an n-dimensional sphere. Okay. So earlier, the boundary was an n-dimensional Euclidean space. Okay. In this coordinate system, the boundary becomes an n-dimensional sphere. Okay, so this is just a pictorial representation of this. Okay. So we can also state ADS CFT correspondence in this coordinate system. Okay. And in these coordinates, the statement is that the path integral over fields in string theory on this space gives the correlation function of the conformal field theory on the sphere. Okay, in this case, okay, you are talking about conformal field theory on an n-dimensional sphere rather than an n-dimensional flat space. Now, this may look a little surprising, right? Because in ADS space, we think of, on the ADS space, all you are doing is coordinate transformation, right? So nothing has changed. Okay. Now, if you have a normal quantum field theory, okay, a normal quantum field theory on a Euclidean space is quite different from the same quantum field theory put on a sphere. Okay. So one might wonder how come these two are giving the same theory, right? That we are starting from the same theory in the bulk. As a gravity theory, they are really just coordinate transformations of each other. But as a boundary theory, in one case you are getting the conformal field theory on R4, Rn, in the other case you are getting conformal field theory on an n-dimensional sphere. And the answer to that is that conformal invariance in fact allows us to relate the correlation functions on the sphere and the Euclidean space. Right? This is a special property of conformal field theory, that if you have the correlation functions on an Euclidean space, okay, you can also reconstruct the correlation function on the n-dimensional sphere. Okay? And that's the reason why this works. Now this is something that I have already said before, but let me remind you again. Okay. That the precise relation between CFT and string theory on ADS has two defined kinds of applications. Okay, in fact many defined kinds, but we can broadly classify this into two classes. Okay. That first, we can use this to test ADS CFT correspondence, provided we can compute both sides of the relation, right? Given a relation, so you have a very precise statement of this in ADS is equal to this in CFT. Now you can, if you can independently calculate, okay, what is something on the CFT and the corresponding quantity in ADS, then you can check if they are the same. So this certainly gives us a way to test ADS CFT correspondence. On the other hand, if we accept ADS CFT correspondence to be correct, maybe after doing lots of tests, then we can use this to map a complicated problem in gauge theory to a simple problem in string theory and vice versa. Right? Because we will see typically, okay, that whenever a problem is simple in one theory, okay, it is a complicated problem in the other theory, right? So it can really help us in understanding both sides of the story, right? Solve complicated problems on both sides while mapping them into simple problems on the other side. Are there any questions? So in the rest of the talk, we will discuss tests of ADS-CFT. Okay. And so as I already mentioned, in order to test ADS-CFT correspondence, we need to compute some quantities that independently on both sides. Right? Only then we can compare. Now, on the CFT side, these quantities depend on various parameters of the CFT. Okay. In particular, let's focus on the first example that we described, where the CFT is a 3 plus 1 dimensional UN Yang-Mills theory. Okay, 3 plus 1 dimensional supersymmetric UN Yang-Mills theory. Okay. In this case, the parameters of the CFT are, for example, the n of UN. Right? This n is an integer, but it's still a parameter of the CFT. And then you also have the Yang-Mills coupling, right? G Yang-Mills. Okay. These are in fact the only two parameters that characterize the CFT. Well, there is another parameter which is the theta angle, which I have not written. Okay, but roughly you can think of these as the two parameters. Now on the ADS side also, the quantities depend on various parameters, okay, but this time the parameters are characterized the ADS geometry, okay, and these are the size of ADS and the string theory coupling GS for type 2B on ADS 5 times S5, because we said that we are on the ADS side of the story, we have a specific string theory on ADS 5 times S5. That string theory comes with its own coupling constant, which I will call GS. Okay. So R and GS are the two parameters on the string theory side. Okay. And it turns out that the ADS-CFT correspondence tells us precise relation between these parameters. Okay. So in particular, there is a precise relation between N and G Yang-Mills on one side and R and GS on the other side. Okay. So once we have calculated on the CFT something as a function of N and G Yang-Mills, and we have calculated the same quantity in gravity or string theory as a function of R and G string, okay, we can compare and see if they are the same, okay, because the relationship between the parameters is completely known. So in principle, you should be able to compare the various quantities in ADS and CFT as functions of these parameters. However, it turns out that typically quantities which are easy to calculate on one side in certain limit of the parameters become difficult on the other side in the same limit, and vice versa. Okay. That imagine that you have some quantity that you can calculate easily on the CFT side in some limit of the parameters. Okay. Then you translate what that limit corresponds to on the gravity side or on the string theory side, and you find that precisely in those limits, okay, the calculation of the gravity side becomes difficult. Right. And this is the reason why testing ADS-CFT is not such an easy task. Right. Because anything that you can calculate easily on one side is more difficult on the other side. Right? You have to be really clever in devising tests. Okay. So this makes testing ADS-CFT difficult. Okay. Nevertheless, many clever tests of ADS-CFT have been performed by focusing on quantities which can in fact be computed on both sides. Okay. And this requires a lot of techniques. Okay. Sometimes reverse supersymmetry, sometimes large n limit, okay, and various clever ways of getting exact answers on both sides so that you can compare. Okay. But I will just state that there are many tests, okay, which have been made, okay, and in fact many of them, some of them at least were discussed also in this conference, or are closely related to the things which are discussed in this conference. Okay. And we have very good understanding, okay, that ADS-CFT is really correct, okay, up to a caveat that I am going to talk about in the next slide. Now it turns out that most of the tests, okay, which have been performed so far, okay, make use of a limit in which on the string theory side we can use classical description. Okay. That is, we can use the limit of small string coupling. Okay. That doesn't mean that the string theory side the calculation is easy, right? Because sometimes on the string theory side you have to do the calculation for strong curvature, right? When the ADS space is highly curved, okay, that we know now various ways to handle that, okay, but we always try to keep the string coupling small, okay, we always work in the leading order in the string coupling, and the reason for this is that while quantizing string theory has been well understood in certain background, including flat spacetime. In fact, that's where string theory started its life. Extending this to ADS background is still not well developed. Okay, there has been a lot of work, but it's still in its infancy. And so, while the correspondence between classical string theory and ADS and the dual CFT has been well tested, its extension to quantum string theory is still in its infancy. Okay, we really have a very good understanding that the classical string theory is really dual. Okay, this is really equivalent to a corresponding theory, corresponding limit of the CFT. No, not low energy limit. Just the string loop corrections are all ignored, right? On the string theory side, you work at the tree level. That's what I mean by classical string theory. No, supergravity is the low energy limit, right? We know how to go beyond supergravity.
So why do you call it classic?
Genus 0. Genus 0 is different from alpha prime expansion, right? String theory has two parameters, alpha prime expansion and the GS expansion, right? We can go to all orders in alpha prime, right? There are techniques which have been developed by now, but the problem is in going higher order in G string. Okay, are there any other questions? Now, one could of course take the point of view that once you have established the correspondence at the classical level, we can simply use the conformal field theory as a definition of quantum gravity in ADS space, right? So, who cares whether quantum string theory is equivalent to quantum conformal field theory? We just take that it has a definition of quantum string theory. Now, this of course is a possible approach to this problem. It's a possible philosophy. Okay. Nevertheless, it's useful to ask if this holographically defined quantum gravity, okay, and here by holographically defined quantum gravity, I mean this philosophy, right, that you use the conformal field theory to describe quantum gravity. Okay. We can ask, is this holographically defined quantum gravity obeys the usual rules of local quantum field theory or string theory, at least in some approximation. So, as an example, okay, we can see that in quantum field theory, there is a continuous production and annihilation of particle-antiparticle pair in the vacuum, right? The vacuum in quantum field theory is a very complicated object because there is a continuous production of particle-antiparticle pair. Can we see this effect in holographically defined quantum gravity theory? Now, of course, in the dual quantum field theory, there is continuous production of particle-antiparticle pair, right? But those particle-antiparticle pairs are not the same as particle-antiparticle from the gravity viewpoint. Okay. So, is it possible to see this continuous production of particle-antiparticle pair in the bulk gravity from the point of view of the conformal field theory? Now, one possible strategy that one could follow is as follows. That we know that in the low energy limit, string theory contains massless particles. Okay, these massless particles of course include gravitons, these are the mediators of gravitational force. Okay, but there are many other massless particles that the string theory may have. Okay, given string theory, we know completely what the massless spectrum is. Now, while we don't have a complete understanding of how to quantize string theory in this complicated ADS background, we do have standard rules for quantizing low energy modes of massless fields in ADS background. So, if we can isolate quantum effects which depend only on the low energy modes of these massless fields, then we can compare them with the prediction from the CFT side and see if they agree. Because the massless fields we know are part of string theory and we know how to handle them in ADS background. And one example where this can be done, okay, are corrections which are called which I'll call logarithmic corrections, okay, and I'll explain what this means. Now, what one finds is the various quantities that you can compute in string theory on ADS may contain terms that involve log r. Okay, r, if you recall, is the radius of ADS. Okay. So, there are quantities in string theory that you can compute, okay, which involves terms like log r. And typically log r terms arise only from quantum effects of low energy modes of massless fields. Okay. And these computing coefficients of log r terms do not require knowledge about massive states or high energy modes. Okay. And the reason for this is that log r corrections essentially come from long range correlations, right? If you have an ADS, right, where will you see a log R, right? It's basically from correlations of particles over a range R. Okay? And particles which are massive don't correlate over range R, right? They have very short distance, their propagator falls off very fast. Okay? And this is the reason typically the log R corrections are sensitive only to the massless fields. Okay? So if we can compute these log R corrections, so it is possible in principle to compute these log R corrections on the string theory side without having to quantize a full string theory in ADS. Okay? And then you can ask that can you compare this with the result from the CFT side, okay? And for that they agree. Now one example of this comes in this ADS to CFT1 correspondence that I talked about, right? Here the dual system is a black hole, if you remember. So let me remind you that the ADS2 arises in the near horizon geometry of extremal black holes, and the CFT1 is essentially a quantum mechanical system with a finite dimensional Hilbert space. Right? That's what I had said earlier. And the rules of ADS CFT correspondence that I described before tells us precisely the relationship between the total number of states in the Hilbert space of the CFT, which is omega, okay, and some quantity on the gravity side, which I'll call Z ADS. Okay. And the relationship is this simple form. Right? The rules of ADS CFT correspondence tells us that omega, the number of states in the Hilbert space, the dimension of the Hilbert space, is exactly equal to Z ADS, where Z ADS is the result of carrying out the path integral over all fields in ADS2 with vanishing boundary condition at infinity. Right? So you put trivial boundary condition at infinity, you carry out the full path integral, okay, and that should be equal to the total number of ground states. Now, as an aside, I should just point out that the classical limit of this correspondence is the famous correspondence between the Bekenstein-Hawking world entropy of the black hole and the log of the degeneracy of states. Right? If you write this relation as log omega equal to log Z ADS, right, then the classical limit log Z ADS is precisely the Bekenstein-Hawking world entropy. Okay, so it's what you are. Yes.
Why are you not trying to do it for the usual ADS by CFT4?
Well, because it's a technical point, this log R correction, the most simplest log R corrections vanish for ADS5 CFT4. Okay. I'll discuss the ADS4 CFT3 case, right? There are log R corrections and I'll discuss those, right? But these in a sense are research, okay, and there are a lot of places where you can calculate these log R corrections. Got any other questions? Okay, so this is the same relation I have written by taking the log of both sides. Okay. And now we have to find a relationship between the parameters on the ADS side and the parameters on the CFT side. Okay. And roughly one finds that the size R of ADS2 is determined by the charge Q of the black hole. Right? And the charge Q of course controls what microscopic system, what quantum system you should analyze to on the microscopic side. Okay. So R is essentially proportional to mod Q. So you see that if we can calculate the log Q terms in log omega, right? So omega naturally is a function of Q. This is the total dimension of the Hilbert space. This is a function of the charges that the system carries because those determine what the quantum system is. So if you can calculate the log Q terms in log omega and the log R terms in log Z ADS, then you have a way to test ADS CFT correspondence at the quantum level.
This corresponds to omega and Z.
Yes.
Is something a constant ADS?
Yes. You just follow the usual rules of ADS CFT, right? It's basically the partition function of the conformal field theory on a circle, right? Is the partition function of gravity, and partition function of the conformal field theory on a circle, if you have finite dimensional Hilbert space with zero energy, it's just trace of e to the minus beta h, right? So it's trace of 1, which is the total dimension of space, right? So it's the usual correspondence that I wrote down earlier, right? In ADS to CFT1 case, it reduces to this statement, right? So you are not using anything more than what I have already told you earlier.
So in this simple case, it actually just corresponds then to the wall length.
Exactly. So it corresponds to the fact that the world entropy should be given by the log of the degeneracy of states in the classical limit. Right? And now what we are trying to do is to analyze quantum corrections to the world entropy. Right? That requires quantum corrections on the gravity side, right? And compare them with the appropriate corrections on the log of the degeneracy of states. Is this okay? Now indeed, for a class of black holes in string theory, you have exact results for omega and hence log omega. Okay, now you are of course not so fortunate for ZADS because that has to be calculated in perturbation theory. Okay. But once you have an exact results for omega, okay, then we can take the expression for log omega and expand into parts it is in 1 over charge, right, and isolate the log q terms. Then for the same system, we can calculate the log r terms in log ZADS by quantizing massless fields in the ADS background. And one indeed finds perfect agreement between the two sides. Okay, the log r terms precisely match up between the ZADS and log ZADS and log omega. Okay. So here I have just given a table showing some of these results. Okay, the details are not important. Okay. So what this table represents, okay, is essentially the result of this calculation in very different theories. Okay. Now just focus on this table, right? This tells you the coefficient of the log correction. Okay. This lambda is that parameter by which you scale the radius, right? So essentially the radius is proportional to lambda here, and for this 5-dimensional black holes, radius is proportional to square root of lambda. Okay. Now you can see, so these are the calculations on the gravity side, right? By looking at the massless loops, okay, loops of massless fields, okay, the quantum continuous production and annihilation of massless fields in this ADS background. Now if you see this column, you can see that there are varied coefficients, right? Different theories have different coefficients. The coefficients also depend on trivially on various details of the theory. This NH and NV are two integer parameters that label the theory. Okay. So it looks very complicated. Now this side, this column shows the result for log omega, wherever the omega is known. And unfortunately the omega is known only for these 4 cases, right? The exact omega has not been calculated for these theories, and the tick marks essentially indicate that wherever omega is known, there is exact agreement between the two sides. Okay, the whatever log r coefficient you get here is exactly what you get from the microscopic side. Okay, so this indeed is an indication that ADS CFT correspondence works also at the quantum level. Okay, at least ADS to CFT1 works at the quantum level. Yes, the question mark essentially means that the microscopic counting is a difficult problem, right? It's that we are lucky in some theories where you can do the microscopic counting, right? Here the dimension of the Hilbert space is not known, right? That's why there is this question marks. And so this is a challenge that in principle somebody can now go ahead and try to calculate these omegas, right? The dimensions of the Hilbert space for these systems and see if it agrees with what we predict from the gravity side. Now, similar analysis can be carried out for ADS4 CFT3. Okay. Now, you see that we are always talking about the even dimensional ADS spaces because it turns out that for the odd dimensional ADS spaces, okay, this particular correspondence, okay, becomes trivialized. The coefficient is 0 on both sides. There is no log r correction. Right? That's why we are focusing on even dimensional cases. So, in this case, you have a relation ZADS equal to ZCFT. Where ZCFT is a partition function of the CFT on a sphere with all the phi I set to 0. Okay. And on the ADS side, we again calculate the path integral of all fields with the 0 boundary condition at infinity. Right? We set all fields to 0 at the boundary. So this is then the prediction for ADS CFT correspondence. Okay, this has again been tested at classical level, in the classical limit for string theory for many theories. Now recall that here CFT refers to low energy dynamics of n membranes, and that is given by what is called the ABGM model. And the precise relation between the size r of ADS and the ABGM, okay, the n membranes, okay, is a parameter of the ABGM model. The precise relation between r and n is that r is proportional to n to the 1/6. Now ZCFT is known exactly as a function of n. Okay, again this is what during last few years, okay, but one now has an exact expression for ZCFT as a function of n. Okay. And so if you can calculate the log r terms in log ZADS again by looking at the massless fields, production and annihilation of massless fields, right, we could try to calculate the log r terms in log z radius from the gravity side and then compare with the log n terms in log z CFT, right, because this is exactly known, so you can in principle expand in a part series in 1 over n and see what is the log n term, log n coefficient is. And again the result is that indeed we have exact agreement between the two sides. The result is minus 3/2 log r from both sides. Okay. The analysis of course is very different on the two sides. Right? In one side it's coming from a counting. Okay. In the other side it's just coming from a massless particle loop. Okay. On the gravity side. Okay, I think I will just skip the next two slides. Okay, essentially the next two slides basically illustrate that it's not only that we can see the loops of massless fields, right? Under certain circumstances we can also detect the effect of the loops of massive fields, right? So this in a sense demonstrates that the ADS CFT correspondence works not only at the level of that the dual theory, right, is not only that the massless fields have to be quantized, right? They obey the usual rules that the vacuum is filled with production and annihilation of massless particles, okay, but the vacuum is also filled with production and annihilation of massive string states, right. So you can explicitly see the effect of production and annihilation of massive string states in the on the ADS side, okay, by examining appropriate quantities on the CFT side. Okay, but I will just skip this, okay, and go to the summary. Okay. So essentially the summary of this talk is that ADS CFT correspondence has given us a new way of defining quantum theory of gravity in anti-de Sitter spacetime. This is obviously true. Okay. And we also saw that whenever old ways of dealing with quantum gravity or string theory are valid, the result of the CFT agree perfectly with the old ways. Okay. These old ways include classical limit, okay, as well as some quantum effects, right. Wherever you could calculate anything quantum mechanically on the ADS side, okay, the results do agree with what we predict from the CFT side. Okay. So in a sense, the CFT really defines the quantum theory of gravity as we want it, right. We don't want a quantum theory of gravity which has no graviton, for example, right. We want a quantum theory of gravity which, at least for the low curvature, in the low curvature limit, will have the usual graviton, the usual rules for quantization and so on. Okay, and indeed the dual CFT does contain all that information, okay, to the extent we can test. Now we can think of two ways to go from here. Perhaps this will show us a way how to modify our old ways of describing quantum gravity so as to make this into an exact description, right. We still, do have the old ways, right, the normal string theory, quantization of string theory in at least flat spacetime, we have the old ways, but maybe by gaining knowledge from the CFT side, okay, we will learn how to modify our old ways, okay, and make this into a more precise theory of quantum gravity. Or as Nima already mentioned in his talk, perhaps there is even a completely new description of both quantum gravity and quantum field theories, which demystifies many of the mysteries in other description of the theory. So with this, I think I'll end. Thank you. Yes. At least for technical reasons, right, while checking this correspondence, yes, they do have to be extremal, right. Eventually we would like to go beyond extremal black holes, right, but with the technical tools that we have now, right, we can only test this correspondence between extremal black holes, right, and some degeneracy of quantum systems.
Known results are there for technical.
Exactly, known results are there and you can trust them, right, that they don't get destabilized by changes in the coupling constants.
Just one more question.
What is the most elementary article on the subject of ADS and CFT?
ADS and CFT, well, maybe the experts are there, so they can.
Elementary
Yeah.
article.
No, I know, but
Why would I know string theory?
okay.
I want to learn.
Rajesh, you have some idea?